What is up, boys and girls? Today I will finally be talking about my Abomination Necromancer. But as you can tell, we are not on a page written by me. This is a page written by Lizard IRL, a very prominent max roll content creator. And the reason for this is because initially I wasn't really planning to play this build in the first place. This was only going to be something that I will use for killing Uber Aberoth in the hardcore race. But due to popular demand, here we are, and I am talking about the build. But because Lizard has already written a incredibly good Abomination Necromancer guide, if you want something short and sweet without all of my yapment, I highly recommend to check out the description and simply follow this build guide. There are some things that I think are outdated information. I think overall I have made some improvements to this build, but if you're just looking for a really broken and OP experience, this build guide will deliver. Simultaneously though, I have to tell you guys, I can't really wholeheartedly recommend this build to anybody. Again, initially, I wasn't looking to play this. I was going to play Wraithlord and only really use this one time, but due to the fact that thanks to Twitch chat, we found some cool tech with AoE clearing, Abomination is just a better Wraithlord. You can still play Wraithlord if you're looking to have a fun time with some pew-pew lasers, but Abomination just does just about everything that Wraithlord does, but better with a larger amount of AoE, thanks to the recently discovered Plague on Minion Hit Chance Idols, which allows us to spread Plague with Abomination damage scaling to just about everything on the screen, which really makes for some nice chains and a very satisfying way to play. But again, I keep saying all these nice things. Why am I telling you not to play it? And the reason for this is because this build uses snapshotting, as Lizard also expresses very prominently in his build guide. And the way that snapshotting works in Last Epoch and in a lot of other ARPGs is that it essentially takes a snapshot of the gear that you have currently equipped, and in our case we utilize very offensive gear to summon minions, and we're even switching out different abilities to really have maximum power. And once we get rid of the skills, and once we get rid of those items that give us all of that power to our summoned minion, that minion will retain all of those stats from those items, which then allows us to equip incredibly defensive and powerful gear. As you can see in Lizard's case, I have been very much using this for itemizing my character. He's got a bunch of different sets essentially of gear that he's using at different moments of the game to allow himself to get a bossing minion snapshot. He's got the bossing skill snapshot because yes, you again have to switch those out. You've got one for mapping that's a lot simpler but still quite annoying. You don't have to re-snapshot your Abomination every time if you are in monoliths, as it takes a pretty substantial amount of time. If you've been watching my streams, you're very familiar with how annoying it can get. But if your game crashes, if you disconnect, if you go to town, if you kill a harbinger, in all of those situations your Abomination resets and you're going to have to re-snapshot, so re-equip all of this gear, use your Abomination, and redo it again. If you go AFK for an incredibly substantial amount of time because Abomination is very tanky, your Infernal Shade can eventually kill your Abomination too, so that's something to keep in mind. But I have to admit, once you have that running, and if you are not too annoyed with all of these elements, yeah, this build is super duper strong. So, like I mentioned previously, how do we level this if we want to avoid snapshotting or maybe postpone it for as long as possible? Initially, it was Spirit Plague. I find that ability to be very good for leveling. Then we switched over to a Infernal Shade, Dread Shade, Archmage setup with the Skeletal Mages. And then eventually, once I found the Wraithlord Helmet, which is pretty easy to farm for now, you can either use Prophecies or you can go try to target those helmet nodes. The runes of Ascendance are also very easy to get Wraithlord with. I believe it's like a 6 or 8% chance to hit a Wraithlord helmet with. Yeah, the build pretty much comes online in stages. But if you want to play Abomination as soon as possible, I would say the only real requirement are some of those chance to inflict plague on hit idols. Again, it has to be minion chance to hit plague, as those are the things that really will enable our AoE clear. And this is, again, something that Lizard doesn't really mention in his build guide, but I don't believe that he had access to this tech. Some of the other things that I kind of disagreed with, or maybe were a little bit outdated, that you might be looking at. I believe Lizard mentions how your snapshotting resets if you switch out abilities, but that is actually not correct. Lizard writes, snapshotting lasts until the minion dies or is automatically resummoned. This typically happens when entering a new zone. However, in monoliths, all echoes are considered a single zone, so you only need to snapshot once as long as you stay in the monolith. The only exception is, again, the Harbinger kills, because you're technically still in the monolith, but for whatever reason, it actually resets it. It only works on the quest versions though, so once you have your 10 Harbingers killed, you don't really have to worry about this anymore. Minions are resummoned when allocating points in their skill tree. Care when you swap gear with plus levels. This is also not correct. You can swap your gear freely, and due to this reason, he has, I believe, a itemization error, which is getting the Assemble Abomination on his not snapshotting Vessel of Strife, which, again, correct me if I'm wrong, but I wasn't really able to find a reason for this. Is completely unnecessary, right? This isn't the gear that we use to snapshot. This would be our mapping minion snapshotting gear, and then we go to our aspirational gear, let's say, and we wouldn't need to use this because our abomination is already present. So really what you want to be focusing on is having as many plus skill levels and as much plus damage and all of that good stuff on this set of gear, which is going to be our minion snapshotting gear. In this case, it is for the mapping variant. So that's just something to keep in mind if you are trying to follow this guide as much as possible. And I have to say, when it comes to just about everything else, I wasn't really able to find better items than the ones that Lizard is using. All of this stuff is incredibly defensive, incredibly strong. For the most part, easy to acquire. The only exception I would say is Conqueror's Inheritance of the Erased. So Inheritance of the Erased, I believe is the item is called. This is a weird one. I gotta say, some of the mods work and some of them don't. So the way that this one works is every 10 seconds a random minion is chosen, receiving Frenzy and 200% of the stats on this item. But the minion is already snapshotted, and this has worked oddly for me. So when I tested it, the critical strike multiplier was working. It seems to be that my abomination was dealing more damage despite the pre-existing snapshot, but then the chance to apply frailty, in my case it was chance to apply armor shred, actually wasn't working. So I am not sure which stats here work and which ones don't. So this amulet is just going to have to be something that you will need to experiment with. I couldn't really find consistent reasons as to why it worked the way that it did, but that's something to keep in mind. When it comes to item priorities, there are some items that are super hard to find on this build. That's going to be the red rings and the Ravenous Void of Blocking. For the red rings, I would highly recommend you use Prophecies for rings if you are playing SSF. This will allow you to find a red ring that then you will be able to imprint onto your woven skill tree. And with those nodes, you will be able to find a substantial amount of them now. So that's a pretty big tip for just about anybody playing SSF. This has allowed me to find probably 25, 30 of these rings. And it's been quite nice. All of them 1 LP at most, but hey, you take what you need. For the Ravenous Void gloves, which is also an item that's incredibly rare, there's actually a trick to getting these, which is going to, let me find it, the Last Ruined Timeline. And if you farm the boss, this guy actually has a chance to drop this, so you can use the Woven Tree to have a chance of dropping the boss item, which will allow you to drop them hopefully sooner rather than later, and then you can imprint them. Or you can just straight up kill the boss, you know, use envies and increase your stability as much as possible to fight as many bosses as possible. These gloves honestly weren't as difficult for me to get just because you are able to farm the boss, but technically it's one of the rarest items in the entire game. And that's pretty much going to be it from me, guys. I mean, again, don't play this build. It is strong. In my case, it is worth it, as I am a Diablo 2 player, which means that I am very familiar and unfortunately very used to snapshotting. But I think it's something that takes away from a modern ARPG, and as much as the developers have been expressing for like 6 years now that they're gonna get rid of snapshotting and rebalance the entire Necromancer class, it hasn't quite happened yet, so abuse to your heart's extent, I suppose. And yeah, I guess just a heads up, this is just a regular mechanic in the game. This isn't something out of the ordinary. You're not gonna get banned or anything like that. It's not against the rules. So you can utilize this not just on this character, but also on the Wraith Lord or any other build. Maybe you're using a particular buff that's allowing you to power up your character, but it comes at a cost of skill points and whatnot. I don't know. Listen, sorry if I just ruined the game for you, but that's the way that these things are in video games. And you know what? Maybe if we talk about it enough, EHG is going to change it sooner rather than later. Make sure to stop by the stream and subscribe to the channel. I hope to see you guys in the next one.